Let me know. Okay, so let me call a regular meeting of the Kirkwood Board of Directors in order. And we'll start out with the roll call.
FC,
Present.
Schroeder,
Here.
Perot. Yeah. Minutes Rhonda.
Here.
Dornbeck here. All aboard.
Okay, that's great. And announcements.
I'd just like to welcome everyone to the regularly scheduled Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District Board meeting. And if anyone would like to speak, please use the raise your hand function.
Okay, and given that, is there, I see no one in the local office audience has a question. So are
The
there
only
any online?
Yeah, we only have two guests. It's Jack and Supervisor Brown.
Okay, so no, nothing there. Okay, and I didn't notice any written comments in the board package. So we covered that. All right, so the next question is, well, sorry, I did it out of order. Are there any corrections to the agenda or the consent calendar?
I have a question about the consent calendar. I want to know if the, how do you call it? The past due balances are part of the consent calendar or not?
They are.
They are.
So can we get them out?
So that would be 7D, review
so we can
receivables.
discuss?
Okay, so we'll defer 7D and we'll move it. Any other changes to the calendar? Agenda? Okay, then we'll move to the adoption of 7A, B, and C, the minutes, the teleconference minutes, and the current consent for claims.
Yeah, Dornbeck so moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Roll call, please. Oh, well, no, we don't. Hey,
Actually, we don't
Hey,
have to because we're all here.
hey, how? Whoa!
It's been what, a year?
Oh, it's been more.
Yeah.
It's probably been
Oh, well, we can just do a voice vote.
2.5.
Yeah, we don't have to identify ourselves every time there's a motion.
Okay.
Is that?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No?
Wow.
Whoa.
It's been 2 years.
Oh, it's been,
Oh, gosh.
wow, okay. Gosh, that was great. Now let's move on.
I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, and we'll
So
move,
I
move
want
item
to see in
7D
the
forward.
minutes This explanation that we just had.
Absolutely.
What page on 7D, Bertrand?
Page is 2122.
Give me a sec.
Okay, you have a question? Yeah,
So
go ahead.
yes, I have a question. I mean, typically, remember, wasn't stuff in the past, we typically had past dues of 40, 50K, whatever. Last month, it was actually way higher. It was about 220, 230, and this month it's another. It's 378. So I just wonder what's going on. Why suddenly do we have so much past due balances?
Vale. It's almost predominant.
Vale.
It's almost not
Yeah.
all Vale. It's not all Vale.
Not all Vail, but yes. I mean, every
they-
Vail account didn't pay, unfortunately, in time.
So just their penalties this last month alone was 19,000.
Okay, and so in absolute, what percentage is that representing out of this? Just to see if we are back to this 40, 50K typical.
I don't know that off the top of my head.
So
I have to find each invoice and subtract it out.
All this is due to that.
It's mostly Vale. I would comfortably say it's at least 70%, if not 80.
Okay, so 80 would be what I would expect based on the numbers. So
Yeah.
And are they the latest ones to the July and June last payment dates?
Where are you looking at, John?
It was right, like the fourth item on page 21 is a last payment July 25th.
Yeah,
No, that is not Vale. Vale's all have the same last payment day, which is the
10/27.
So that's how you can tell who Vale is,
Mhm.
Bertrand. It's 10/27 over here in the far column.
10/27.
If you look at the far column, look on your, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I just want.
Yes, but no, that one is not, and that one should be going to shut off soon because they're going to hit past 90 days, and that's when we start the shut off process.
Mhm.
But I think that's one of the only ones, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's
the-
one for $74, but yeah, so there's two.
Well, there's
are-
one that hasn't paid since June 16th, another one since January 24th.
And that's slightly different. I mean, so there's certain customers who will pay a large amount all at once. So instead of paying $700 each time, they'll pay 1,000 or 2,000 and then let it ride till they need to re-up it. They forget and we remind them.
Okay.
So that's why there's some of those that, especially that July 25th one.
Does that answer your question, Bertrand?
Yeah, that does answer my question.
Okay, so is there a motion to approve the receivables shut-off report?
I move.
Okay, second.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. But then we're ready to go on to item 9A, the finances.
Which brings me up, and I hope that this helps. I tried to bring out exactly where each of the items I was speaking of at least came from, the income statement for for each of the funds, the cash flow preliminaries. We don't have page numbers till the very end, so it's hard to get page numbers, but did everyone understand this?
Take silence as assent.
I will take silence as assent. So just kind of moving through this real quick for those who haven't reviewed in detail. The few ones that I really pulled out that had the bigger discrepancies, G&A in the income statement. We did purchase new snow removal equipment, jackets and pants, especially for our operators to keep them warm, which is something we might want to build into next budget because that's a recurring item that always happens that time of year. We also have that water fund, which operations and maintenance and contract services are going to be higher. Just keep going into that plant and keep helping as much as we can. And sometimes it's over our head, so we bring in outside labor. But income for employee housing, we haven't quite filled all the rooms yet. They are filled now, but that's where that discrepancy come from. Propane rates continue to rise due to the shortages. And so that will continue to build into, unfortunately, something. But it's one of those things that, as Eric pointed out in previous meetings, we do a catch up every month. So it's not as worrisome as could be, but it's a timing issue. For solid waste, this would be the last. We'll have one more month of shipping that'll be hitting salaries and wages, and then that should be going back down to normal. Any questions on the income statements that I didn't address here?
Any questions?
No.
Tom? Okay, no?
Moving forward to the cash flow then, if we may, Eric.
Yes.
So for the cash flow, you notice the total operating for November is 2 million, which is great. It's 412,000 above budget. And this is due to our expenses being under budget. Our incomes have been below budget, but our expenses are even more so. So that really helps. Just been trying to be as frugal as possible. You also note that in December, a Russ loan payment of 100,000 is due and budgeted, and it's in that Russ principal. Any questions about cash flows?
Any questions for Tom? I don't see any. So,
I'll keep rolling.
okay, keep going.
For November preliminaries, great to see, but commercial revenue is significantly up from plan due to snowmaking. Vail's really trying to push the 50th year and really trying to get as much snow as they can on the ground, which hopefully after tonight and tomorrow we won't have to worry about again. But we are 100,000 over budget for commercial, and that's where that comes from. Any questions about that?
None?
Thank you.
Okay, so that covers everything?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll move on to 9B, performance reporting.
All right. So if we take a look at starting with electric, you can see what Tommy was saying there between our budgeted kilowatt hours and our actual metered kilowatt hours. There's a big discrepancy because of snowmaking. We had a 12% loss in electric for November. This does not include any reads from the backside. There might be a little catch up there. We're at 17% for year to date. And then propane, we had a large negative loss, negative 49% for the month, sitting at negative 20% year to date for propane for the year. We expect that to reverse. And if we take a look down at water next, we have production from the wells of 1.4 million gallons, a 22% unidentified loss. For the month, we did find in early December a water leak on a service line before the meter. It's undetermined how long that went on, so it's possible that the losses in October also reflect this. It has been temporarily repaired and will be repaired by the homeowner next summer. It is no longer leaking. So water year to date, we're at 18% unidentified losses, and similar in wastewater. At our plant, we had an influent meter of 700,000 gallons. 20% of that was unidentified unmetered usage, bringing us to 13% for the year.
I don't ever remember it being that low.
Yeah, it says this is probably a record for the year.
Absolutely. For wastewater, if you look at last year's, which is in the packet also, this month last year, we were sitting at 24%. So that is a very good number for us at this time this year. So in addition to this performance report, you have the aquifer level sheet and the graphs. You also have the graphs for each department that are units sold versus temperature. So you can see how, you know, the temperature impacts, especially propane. And then you have the aquifer level sheet showing the levels of the aquifer. We have not had any recent snowmaking at Timber Creek, which impacts our aquifer. So we're going to be watching that to see that number come back up. Are there any questions on performance reporting?
So I'm trying to understand that. So you think that the drop, the relatively low number in early December is from the snowmaking?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that makes sense.
They made quite a bit of snow even at Timber Creek this season.
And we did not curtail them at all this year.
Yeah, and that only represents a few days in December because it's whatever date you took the report.
Mhm.
It has a daily
Yep,
calculation. Okay.
So we don't have yet a number for November. For everything. I mean, the last we have is October 22nd, 22.
I'm sorry, for what now?
In your diagrams, plotings, you don't have the data for November 2022.
For the aquifer level average
For
and
electric usage, propane usage, water usage, use the plot like shown on the computer. The last data point you have is October 2022.
Yeah, the statements were done a little bit later this year, and this was pulled the day before the statements came out, and that's why it's missing on those.
I mean, I see a
What?
plot mark.
Yeah.
Are we talking about?
No, it's just that
It's
the November
oh,
this
it's
year
the bar.
is not there because it gets those from the statements, and the statements weren't done at the time this was pulled.
right.
Any other comments on performance reporting? Questions? Brandy, anything else?
Not for me.
Okay, we'll move on to 9C then, which is the meter shed status update.
Perfect. So we have had good results. John Campbell has been contacting people who were on our to be shut off list for December. When I put this in the packet, we were at 4. That is down to 3 at present. And these are people who we're looking for an agreement from them, an indemnity agreement to avoid shutoffs, which would happen potentially on the 18th if we don't get these last 3 resolved. But this has been a high priority for John and for me. You can see that we are up to 65% in our completed category for residential. And then not much change on commercial. We don't have anybody, any establishments in the December timeframe. There are still 3 remaining for January, but all 3 of those have been contacted and are planning to send in their agreements before the shutoff date. So the project continues. We are hoping to get these last few finished up so that we don't have any shutoffs this winter.
I'm sorry, Brandy, for the 3 that are listed high, do you mean actually doing the repair?
Which 3 are you talking about, Bob?
The January and February that are rated high?
They have to do the repair.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they have been contacted. One of them is working with a handyman and potentially an engineer to get something signed off on by then, the one in January. So they do know that's coming. I'm hopeful that that will get resolved. And that is all I have on meter protection.
Any questions for Brandy? Okay, let's move on to item 9C, a proposal for employee temporary gas stipend.
Yeah, so briefly, I mean, all the math is in here and the assumptions and the parameters of the calculations are in here. But, you know, in various interviews recently, management has come to realize that the gas stipend's not become an uncommon thing anymore. It's, you know, probably 50-50 for people that aren't working remote. And so the personnel committee considered providing a gas stipend of $60 per month within the parameters as provided in the recommendation.
Now, the first comment I would make is actually I did fill my tank today. It was a 376. So what concerned me in the proposal scheme here, it is one size fits all, and obviously this is different impact for different people.
Right.
And I have no crystal ball, but it looks like actually the oil price is coming down. I just would recommend that we just pause on that and see what's going on before we go that route.
Yeah,
It's fairly static the way you design it.
right. It would also go away if the gas stayed at below 430 for 3 months.
And it would go away in 6 months, or if the board decided to make it go away, but it would terminate without further board action.
So I think the feeling of personnel, we don't want to make it too complicated. We'd like to recognize that it's a stress. This is a way of recognizing the stress, but also eliminating this if the prices stay low for a couple of months. My ability to predict oil prices has been dramatically bad.
Well, especially in California.
It's difficult, I understand that.
Yeah, so this is a way of sort of representing the problem to the employees and
It's a good motivation, I think,
yeah.
for them to drive out.
And we're having a staffing issue. So this
Yeah,
might help.
totally.
Yeah.
I'm prepared to move that we pass this recommendation.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any additional discussion people want to have?
Yeah, no, I basically say what I have to say. I think
Okay.
I think it's too static the way it's done.
Uh-huh.
And so now the way it is, it might basically, with a fluctuation stuff, it may end up being until July 23, whatever happens. So I think we'd like to have something a bit more dynamic. And there are several ways to do that. I'm not I mean, I know it's a hassle to keep changing systems. That's probably why you think about having 3 months period so we don't spend our time. But how complex it is to actually have it just based on the last month's rate of gas cost, and any months that actually are above a specific number,
Sure.
then people would get some assistance. And if the month is not like that, they don't get it. And I think that'll be more
Yeah.
dynamic and more.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, but my opinion is the savings that we would have for that would be gobbled up by the extra labor we're doing, and it's not worth it. We would spend as much in labor to do these calculations once a month and cut different check amounts and reset the templates than just do a static one.
That's what I was asking,
Yeah.
is basically how much of a hurdle it is to add that.
It's not a hurdle, it's just gonna cost as much in labor to do that as it is the $5.30 we'll save per whatever.
Could it be automated? So each time we basically input
No,
once
not
a month, you
no.
input the previous month's rate of the gas. I suppose we have a
No,
benchmark somewhere.
there's too many other things that are involved in that. No.
Well, it'd be kind of nice to make it simple for the employees.
So they can plan.
Yeah, and I think if this was an ongoing situation, we might try to think about those issues and how we would design it. For this, the committee's feeling was just keep it simple and hope the gas prices drop.
Right. I mean, I think it's stressful for them to try to plan their budget if they're assuming they're gonna get a.
And I don't want to go into discussion why I bought the
Stipend.
gas 2 weeks ago,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
right? So that was kind of why we,
Well,
I don't
that's- somebody might
disagree
not-
if it was a larger amount.
And then they might not pay attention and they get $47 instead of what they thought they were getting $58, and then you get a disgruntled employee.
Anyway, that was the reason why we didn't try to.
So that's on the trigger, and I think it'd be nice to have it a bit more dynamic.
Yeah.
Then the other thing is it's £60 a month up for everyone, and some people have much less impact on others. So I know that
Everybody
you have
actually-
excluded the people who actually live in the valley.
Yeah, Bertrand, so let me push back on that misstatement.
Yes.
It's not very different for everyone. It's about the same. If you look at the analysis for people that are commuting from the west side, generally it's 51 miles. From the east side, it's 39 miles. If you're living in Valley, you're not eligible for this, so it doesn't matter. That's what it says right here. If you're receiving the housing credit, you don't get the gas stipend. So anyway, so it's basically people in Nevada are about 40 miles away and people in Amador County are about 50 miles away. It's pretty much close enough that they're about the same. They're not dynamically different.
Well, I do understand the need to keep it simple. I agree with that. In your exclusion, you said, where was that exclusion thing? Can you point it to me?
Under the recommendation number 1.
If you're receiving the housing credit, then
Yeah.
you're not
So
eligible.
if you receive the housing credit, it means you are in the valley, but you are not in Lavarock. Or
If you're receiving the housing stipend, which would be Lava Rock or any other place you're living, you are not eligible for the gas.
so now I'm confused on the housing credit. I thought the housing credit was the amount of money that you were paying.
No.
people.
No, it's a static amount, 480. If you are living if you have a place that you live in the valley, permanent, part-time or full-time, you get 480. That's what you get is a housing credit.
And if you don't live in the valley, you don't get a housing credit.
Correct.
Oh. I thought the
You
housing
heard the
credit-
utilities are kind of expensive here, and
Yeah.
it's helping to cover that.
Yeah.
So if the district provide your housing.
No,
You don't get it,
stop. No.
No.
If you live in the valley, you get $480.
even if you are.
If you live in the valley, you get $480. Period, the end.
They
There's
pay
no
their
if, no
utilities
but.
too.
That's,
There.
yeah, just straight away, whether you're, because they have to pay rent for Lava Rock. But this offsets that and utilities for Lava Rock, just like they have to pay rent if you lived in Thimblewood or KMA or Meadowstone. You're still you still get the credit, doesn't matter where.
Okay, I was not aware. I thought it was for the people who are not housed actually.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's just commuters from outside the valley is
Yes.
what this covers.
that live outside, that
That live
full-time,
outside.
that don't have any place to live in the
Yeah,
valley.
it
Right,
definitively makes sense in this case. Yeah.
Okay, good. Should we call for a vote then?
Sure.
Let's try it.
All in favor?
Aye.
No, I'm going to abstain on this.
Okay, yeah, all right.
Okay,
Oh,
four.
abstaining one?
Yeah.
Okay, so 5 aye, 1 abstention. Okay,
Four ayes.
4 ayes and 1 abstention.
Unless you added something before.
Okay,
This
All
is
right.
like so new.
it's so new. It's too exciting to really manage. Okay, we covered that. Next item is 9E, policy for reducing electric AMU.
Right, so this has been kicking around with planning. There's a few questions for the board to decide, which I'm sure you've read. But I think the first question is, under the recommendation is, if the board decide if they want to adopt an AMU reduction program as is proposed, and if so, then we should go through
Okay.
the nuances that were still up for debate.
But before we get to any specific decisions, let's spend a little bit of time and just see if there's questions on the proposal or comments on it, and then go into the various actions that we could take. So let me see if start first with questions.
I would just add some context
Or-
as a
yeah,
reminder for this
please.
as well, which is this is one of 2 proposals that planning is going to be working on, and this is the first one. And the idea is that this conversation here wouldn't necessarily be the last one. So whatever we decide here, the idea that we put out in our planning notes from, I think it was June or July, was saying that we would then go to a community forum to have more feedback on this. And the second one, which is going to be about standard deductions in AMU. And then at that point, we would go by the end of this fiscal year to enact this stuff. So it's not, I just want to make sure everyone understands where we are in the overall process as well.
Okay, so what do you want the outcome of this conversation
To be that we have something to go forward with to take into the public forum as the board's recommendation as to what people would then comment on.
Okay,
If a coalesced perspective on what this could look like.
Okay.
That make sense?
So may I make a comment? I'm sorry that with your mask and I hear, I just can't understand what you said. I just want to make sure what you said correspond to what I understood, which was we had questions back to the board, so we could further discuss. I think that's what it is. So we wanted to know, for example, one issue was, should it be limited to people that have efficiency-based reduction, or lifestyle would be also okay? Because one time we discussed that and we were not clear on the board position of that. That's one thing, yeah.
I think more generally, Bertrand, all I was saying is that the idea that we floated earlier in the year was that we would take this topic and one other one into a more community setting, similar to a rate making process, to get more community feedback on whatever we decide today. And then we will then take that forward to get approved by the end of the fiscal year. That was all I was saying, is that this isn't the final decision. There will be more conversation on this.
And what's the other?
Standard AMU discounts, for example, if you were an all-electric customer and you installed something that was much more efficient, or like how could we be? Could you get some sort of discount?
Efficient or propane to electricity?
Both. Those are the 2 main topics. If you had a fixed AMU, I'm trying to jog my memory. If it was like a fixed AMU and you were all electric, then you can get a discount for that just because you were all electric before your AMU was set. And then I believe the other one was propane to electricity switching with a non-fixed AMU, but I have to double check my notes on it.
And is there anything on change of ownership that you're working on?
I mean, it's one of the topics here in this concept where this is a change of ownership, but nothing different than it's in the current rate design, I would say.
I mean, the change of ownership where should somebody electrify, you have a fixed AMU, sell the house? Could a new owner inherit the old AMU? That current case.
I think that would come through the second provision on the AMU, standard AMU discounts.
I think it could fit there. I know what you're asking. Yeah, I think that could fit there. If someone was electrified, or yeah. You could go that way. And if there's a standard discount, then yeah. And then what he's saying is, can someone carry it? Because an all electric house was ahead of the curve of our propane policies. Could they inherit an old AMU discount, which would have been prior?
Correct.
So that could be part of the standard aim. It could be part of that for sure.
Okay, I guess I have one question on this before we get into any of the specifics. My understanding of what we did with solar is we said the AMU is based on your gross consumption, not your net consumption. And then we excluded the existing solar homes for 10 years. So in that particular case, I don't think that solar is a special case, as it says there in 3B, because it's their gross usage. So it doesn't matter whether they have local generation or not. So I just want to
I agree.
just offer that correction to what's in there.
And I agree. I went back and looked at the rate study after you had mentioned that to me, and you're correct.
Okay,
I was remembering the 4 iterations before.
well, there were
probably.
many iterations.
So that's 100% my mistake.
Okay. Here's my second question on the structure. So a customer could say, I'd like to do a reset on my AMU. Okay, you can do one. There'd be a reason behind why they're asking for that. But then where does the measurement start and end? Or is that the equivalent of just buying, like you just sold your home to yourself? Yeah.
So I can answer that. So
Okay.
that comes under, so one, you said one thing that isn't decided, which is one-time reset or every
Okay.
5 years. So
Right.
that's just one caveat. I just want to make sure that the
Yeah.
planning committee had no consensus on that. It was split.
Okay,
So basically they'd be treated just like a new customer and they're beginning their 3-year AMU, which means April 1st. So we treat it exactly like it is. in the
okay, so it's
ordinance.
just like they sold their house. to
Exactly
somebody.
like they sold their house. Yeah, you
Okay,
got
so
it.
it's because in theory, I sold my house to my trust well before this came up. And so
Yeah.
someone could have to fake it. So this is just, and one thing it does is
And
that you
having a
don't have
wife
to.
that's an estate planning attorney, you quit claimed it to your trust. You didn't sell it to your trust, right?
So how-
Yeah, I'm sure, I'm sure, whatever is the right thing to do. I
But yes,
did,
so
yeah.
it would be just like you selling your home to Doug or you
Yeah.
making these upgrades, it would be treated. So we have, and this was, I think the committee agreed on this. We have one process for everything. It's
Right.
just simplified.
Yeah,
Whether they were unique situation or whether they were energy efficiency.
Okay.
Doesn't matter which one.
Yeah.
Treated the same, treated just like a sale of a house.
yeah,
All
okay.
the same. It definitely makes it easier for staff, and I like that that's the recommendation that came out of
And
planning.
it makes it easier for the programmer too.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
I
At
think,
least they gave you a heads up of where you're heading, so you had a few months to
I'm
start.
sure
thinking
Corey
about
would
it.
do this.
I think there are like, potential corner cases, right? Where this is where there's like that border year, right? Because it's like, suppose you do something in, sometime in the year. If this is calculated on the year before, I can imagine there's some math where it's like, you wouldn't hit the 20% reduction in 1 year because you did it mid-year. In that case, I think, do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
you could have some weird case where you go 18% down and then 15% down.
The trigger might not be based on April 1st.
Right,
Just
because
the
you could, just because of, by the time you do something, and I would think that could fall under, that corner case, I think could fall under the first provision of like a unique circumstancing that, so then that way, I don't think we have to overthink when it starts. I think, again, one of the things we talked about planning was, suppose I did this on, whatever, if it starts on April 1st, but like, the fiscal year, it's like the day after my year starts, then I'd have to wait like a whole nother year potentially, which kind of isn't fair, but like,
Right.
what's easier, and it's like, I don't know, we could ask people to choose. I mean, there are lots of options on how to implement this. We had talked about maybe having like the first year of the reduction be the first year of the 3 years. I could kind of go either way on this. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, in order to demonstrate it, it doesn't matter whether if they demonstrate 20% over last year or they have to give the 20%. So whether they want to include that in their 3-year, I wouldn't see why not and why we wouldn't allow that.
Right.
Because they have to demonstrate it first. So they could either say, no, we're going to get more efficient, start it today. Or yeah, that's as efficient as we're going to get. We got our 20% started April 1st of last year. From a staff perspective, that doesn't matter. It's just a data entry point into the formula. That's fine. I don't see the reason to limit it. I think we should just kind of, I would err on leaving it more open to people.
Yep.
Which I think is where you were going anyway.
Yep.
Because it doesn't create an additional burden on staff or a record keeping nightmare. It's
So
not
it's
a big
just
deal.
the date effectively that the pretend sale occurred.
Okay, as long
Yeah,
as,
it
The
is.
pretend sale. There you go. Yeah.
and I would just say, yeah, it could be the next year or the year of the demonstration would be the two options.
Agreed.
And I would just keep it to those two, but I think that's one of the things that we discussed as options, but if it's easy, then let's do that. I think that would be one thing I'd like to see in this.
Yeah. I would like to pick one, but I don't mind that we would have it open to either one.
Okay.
So we're going to create a flow chart. So people, by the time we get to the community here, we're going to kind of create a flow chart. So somebody could say, if I did follow the flow chart to, do I qualify? Right. So we could have a separate flow chart. Do I want to take the year that I just demonstrated, or do I want to start this year? You'll have two choices, follow the flow chart. Then your AMU begins thus, and you would be set by this date. It's something pretty simple like that anybody could just follow step by step and get the answer of how they qualify.
Okay.
Or would they qualify, sort of thing.
I would think that most energy improvements would take place during the summertime.
Well, unless your propane appliance broke in the winter.
Yeah, Pete, I would have agreed with you before COVID, but I saw a lot. I mean, we saw a lot of construction debris during the winter the last few years. So most of it's in the summer, but yeah, there's been a lot. I just saw a guy drive by with construction debris, and I needed to call staff and make sure they didn't put it in their dumpsters. But so stuff's still going on. I see a contractor doing a remodel of metal stuff.
meter sheds. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen people going out in the snow working on the meter sheds.
So let's see, other comments or questions?
I mean, there are two other main discussion points, but I mean, so far, are there any other questions?
Did you consider notifying customers who might benefit from this based on the drop in usage?
We did talk about
Discuss it,
that.
but I don't
We
think
discussed
can,
it, but I thought the consensus was that the customers need to be proactive. If they're looking for discount, they should be proactive in looking for that discount.
Yeah, I mean, I think that most people wouldn't be paying attention. And so it seems fair that you'd say, hey, you should look into this. We've seen a drop in your usage.
Could put it in the
But
newsletter.
The problem is,
Put it in the bill.
but I think the problem with that though,
That's
John,
our most
is
important.
just because they dropped doesn't mean they've done any improvements. They could have just gone to Switzerland for 4 months, and that's their normal time in Kirkwood, and they decided to go to Europe for the year.
Well,
that
unless you
shouldn't-
triggered it on residency too. Right?
Well, that's the question.
Well, yeah,
That is a debatable question, because there was half and half, there was a
Yeah.
minority.
the way I would think about John's question is just your average usage while in residency drops 20%. Did your kids go to college and the TV isn't, the TV is one of the largest consumers of electricity in your house.
Really?
It's,
Yeah, but what if they're in residency and it was a warm December like last year where we had no snow, or November versus a cold December,
Yeah.
November.
it was,
I'm worried we're introducing too many variables to try and make this a proactive on our side system, and it's going to be a lot of staff effort versus you want this, fill out a form. You're wanting to give this free money at the district's expense. You should come to us and ask for it.
yeah, I'm just saying, being able to tell the customers this is your usage characteristic. And oh, by the way, these are the programs we have available. And if you think any of these things fit in line, you should evaluate it.
That would be something in the newsletter, for example.
Oh, I would,
of
you'd want to,
explaining that, but I think,
Yeah.
I agree, it put burden on the staff.
Yeah.
To be, that means programming, otherwise you are not going to be able to follow it. So that means you need
No,
to put
right.
some programming into place to pull out the situation.
Yeah.
So I think just notifying people via newsletter
that these are the programs.
That's a
and-
program,
yeah,
explain the program, and that people need to be responsible
I
as
agree.
well.
I agree.
Otherwise, it puts the district, if we don't notify because we miss it, then people are going to be upset with
Yeah.
the district. And so I think I
Okay.
agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
I have two other comments. So I agree fully on the solar, the fact that we use gross on any new project, gross consumption. I don't think we should actually take them as a special case. Actually, the idea there was to treat solar like everybody.
Right.
So that's number one. Number two is I'm still not comfortable with day residency requirement for several reasons. First, the day of water usage is not very accurate, unfortunately. I know that last week I was there all time, and for 3 days I basically I didn't have any I didn't trigger an event. So it looks like I was not there, and I'm sure it happened to you sometime as well. So I have some reservation on the fact this is not very accurate.
It's a proxy, but
it's not accurate. Number one. Number two, I still believe that people going into retirement and on Florida, and though they don't come as often, they should not be stuck forever to whatever lifestyle they had 5 years ago, basically. And so I'm concerned of that. And I thought we had discussed the idea to let people who would have, and I think if people are living, let's say drop 50% in their of their water usage, so we know there is clearly a lifestyle change. But again, because their usage of water usage is not very accurate, I think it has to be broad stroke. So 50% or don't go to 20. I mean, 20% seems to be questionable because of the accuracy of the method. So anyway, my point is, should we, and my question here to the board is, do we need a residency requirement, or we accept that people have lifestyle change and we accept that people can make change to be more efficient, and we let them actually reset, because that's what it is. It's a reset.
Well, just to be clear, they're not being more efficient. And your example is not them being more efficient, they're just leaving.
No, actually,
Yes.
that's one case. If you are more efficient, so if you have
Right.
resistive electrical heating, and you invest a heat pump, which costs a bundle, talking a significant investment, and their consumption is probably going to reduce by 2, maybe 3. And should we let people, independently of why do we restrict with, why do we have this requirement of no change in the day usage? So I would keep it simpler. If you are reducing your consumption based on what you were estimated before, it could be for lifestyle, it could be for efficiency changes, then you can reset once every 5 years.
So what about the situation, Bertrand, where someone decide we're not going to Kirkwood for the next 3 years, we're going to go vacation somewhere else. They get it reset and then they come back full bore. Then what? How do we deal with someone who does that? Because that would open this to huge gaming. And there are people here whose lifestyles are such that we have one person that hasn't been here in 10 years living in, Crested Butte, Colorado. Well, what if they suddenly came back with this lower EDU, for example, or lower AMU? I just worry that if we don't have a residency requirement, so we can compare an apples to apples, because the residency, it's going to be as inaccurate here as it is here. It's not going to really change too much. It's going to be, for comparison's sake, it's the best proxy we have.
No, I agree. It's from
And
both
so
sides.
the only reason we think a residency as staff is important is because there could be some significant gaming in the system, and we never go the other way. This is only reduction. We're never going after someone who suddenly goes from 0.5 AMUs. Let's say I decide to, when I'm all set after 3 years, or Doug's all set after 3 years, we decide to come live full time and put in a bunch of big screen TVs and start doing some data mining. for Bitcoin and we're at 7 AMUs, but you can't get us.
That concern is true even if you don't reset. I have a fairly low usage based on my history. I could put a hot tub tomorrow and I will not pay my fair share.
But we want you to do that.
Yeah.
That's the idea. We want you to do it. That was the whole idea of having a
Yeah,
fixed
so,
base. Yeah.
Not for
So,
the hot tub,
What?
not for the hot tub.
so your use case is actually, it's for everybody. It's because we have a system that doesn't want to change. I think I'm not going to reprint that electrical rate study, but I was for something dynamic and we went for something static. And now I think following one every 5 years to be set is actually to be reasonable. So we don't get a lot. Some people are stuck forever with whatever situation they were in at the time of the rate studies.
No, I think the other way, you're onto something there, Bertrand. I think if the next time we do a rate study, we do rate studies every 5 years, we could look for dynamic changes in AMUs, up or down.
Yeah.
And then we wouldn't have to do this.
I agree. So in this case, we don't have a problem.
That's what we talked about.
In this case, we don't have a problem because that rate study will happen before anyone can actually reset. Because when you reset, you need 1 year to show the data.
Yeah,
And if you do it in June,
it can never hit. You're right.
18 months.
It can never hit. You're right.
And then you have the 3 years to create a new calculation. So that gives us plenty of time. So I'd favor to keep it simple and remove that residency. So some people end up in the hospital because they are older age and they should not have to keep paying whatever they were doing when they were actually living there.
I'll just remind the board that you all voted on not having a dynamic AMU for the purposes of encouraging electrification, because a dynamic AMU just turns into a long run.
Yeah.
Fixed charge. So, I mean, we talked about that, and me personally, as a non-board member at the time, has talked about that concept extensively. So, I mean, we have talked about that at good depth. So I feel like we are at this point where we have what we have, and now we're trying to allow some flexibility. That's where we are.
Okay. Is there more discussion or should we see where we are on the questions? Because I guess the other concern I would raise in having a community meeting on this is how much financial impact are we willing to absorb? And does this apply to commercial?
Yes.
So if they decide to only run a lift on the weekends,
I think that we should restrict it maybe to residential.
We can't.
We cannot.
I would.
And yeah, Bob, I didn't even, that's the point that completely skipped over planning. I know for absolute fact that they barely got in a motor for one of their lifts and they were planning on leaving a particular lift down all winter. That would have been significantly impacted revenue. And if they asked for a recalc after that, that could, yeah. Yeah, there is that potential.
So that's why, and rewarding an investment, either from propane to electric or electric to more efficient, makes sense. But otherwise, moving it around just makes it really just makes it a volumetric charge that only has a temporary, there's a lag time between when you use more and when you pay for all of it.
Kind of penalizes full timers who will rely on.
In what way? In what way exactly?
I think I just think this whole setup is penalizes
Oh,
full
got it.
time.
Not this necessarily specifically, just in general.
Right.
Gotcha.
That's why, and the way we charge EDUs for water consumption is based on capacity, whether that person uses their capacity or not. So you don't have this constant readjustment.
Well, we currently have no readjustment.
Yeah.
And the difference between the old rates and these rates for full-time residents was the minimus. The major change was the fact that we raised rates by 7 to 9%, depending on how you calculate it. And that would have happened under the old rates or the new rates. So then that was the point behind trying to, the way we did it is to make it de minimis for most people.
Well, I can see the justification for people replacing old appliances, old methods of heating, but giving them a reward for not coming or doesn't make any sense to me. That's just
Yeah, I
the way
know. I can go along with that.
Because we have to
But-
maintain a certain minimum structure to meet potential capacity, whether it's used or not.
Yeah, and you have the case of the lift being down for the season and then asking for a refund or a
Just-
readjustment.
Can I get clarification on that? So if we maintain a concept of residency, and that's based on water usage, what would that mean for a count that doesn't have, like, I don't know how that would work for, say, a chairlift? How would that be?
It's a great question.
Well, we have to have a certain amount of kilowatts.
Yeah, but what if they
Long
went
term.
to what if they went to a, you know, say they're just running a lake pumps. Let's look at the lake pumps, right? So they're running 80 horsepower pumps out of there. And what if they go to one that's 3 times as efficient, but they're still running 80 horse, but it's a way more efficient pump? That's going to be a huge revenue hit. There's no residency days, and I can't really compare it. I mean, all I can do is compare it against the old one. Is it hit the 20% threshold? That's all I could do. I couldn't. Yeah, you're right. There's, I mean,
Well,
you have to look
but
at
in that
day. I mean,
case-
you guess you could look at days of
usage.
days that it was operational. I
Yeah.
think that's probably, is that the same as residency? Not
Not
quite,
really.
but is it a good closest proxy we have? I think so.
But I mean, in that example you just gave, is that something we would want to reward? Like if they became 3 times as efficient, I mean, obviously from a massive motor that pays a lot of EDUs right now and is important to us, if they became 3 times more efficient, is that a bad thing in the context of what we would say for a residential customer who becomes 3 times more efficient under the same provision?
Yes, it's a bad thing, and because it's magnified, you know, a single lift is an entire HOA,
Understood.
right?
I
So
understand the financial
no,
impacts, but I'm just saying.
yeah,
like,
so the
conceptually.
financial impact is significant, but if you took a whole HOA and they all did the same thing as one lift, yeah, the district's going to be hurt, and we're going to have to raise rates on everyone. So
Sure,
everyone's
sure.
going to get hurt by the implementation of this program in that scenario, yes. And we would have to raise rates substantively to offset these changes. So we're basically almost kicking the can down the road. We're going to give you this discount, and we're going to, by the way, we're going to have raise rates because we have less revenue because we're giving this discount. That's
Well, absolutely, but for that one user, that they're probably lower. But everyone in like, you know, that kilowatt hour, sure, they're gonna go up, or even their base rate nominally, but by going down like 3 EUs,
right.
that's gonna be a better bang for the buck. Yeah, I mean, I think
it's a better demonstration when someone's 112 EDUs going down to 40 than
100%,
yeah. But taken as a magnification, if everyone took advantage of this program, the district would have to raise rates substantively to offset that. So
For sure.
basically we're rewarding it and then we're hitting them on the back end. So
It's a zero-sum game. At the end of the day,
that's
someone is
because
going
we're
to
not
pay for
making
all of this.
profit. That's, you know, we're a
And Someone is
nonprofit.
paying
So
for all of this, and it's just cost shifted at the end of the day. And I think
that's
that,
exactly the
and I-
best way to say it.
and I will say it, my personal intent was not that this would be utilized by every customer every year. It would be a relatively infrequent usage of this. That is, I think, the original intent, from what I understood from the previous board, and how at least I personally approach this. So that is something that I would like to. I mean, I understand, I don't necessarily want to have massive swings in our rates because of one customer making a big change. So, I mean, I don't know, it gets hard because it's a zero-sum game. Everything's going to come back in either the dollars per EDU or the cents per kilowatt hour. It's always going to come back. And there will be a winner or loser at certain times.
No, I mean, if,
One thing that you should also think about, if to minimize impact, negative impact to the district, if instead of have a minimum EDU of 0.5, then you have a minimum EDU of 1, then that's so much that people can actually play with the system. Because now with 0.5, people can actually pay less than they should to actually contribute to the fixed cost. Anyway, my impression, this is not ripe yet, unfortunately.
Well, and I think you said this was just to get feedback to take it.
Yeah.
For more diligence and revision, right? So.
Yeah.
It's not a finished product.
I mean, there's some good thinking in here. I just want to go back to what's the problem we're trying to solve. And what I thought it was, so first of all, there is no perfect way to allocate the fixed costs. And Severin warned us that if you do it based on usage, that has its own set of problems. But we decided to do it based on usage once to try to minimize the impact on people that use a fair amount, raise income, raise revenue for us from people who are seldom using it, because they used to just pay $14, right? Now they pay $6.63 or whatever it is. But if we're trying to encourage people to switch from propane to electric, then once they have an established AMU, that's an affordable prospect to think about. That was one problem that we're trying to address. And the other one was for new construction, they have it be all electric. But in fact, we're solving that by minimizing the number of propane connections. Is that?
yeah,
But that's the other, but I think what you just touched on were both use cases of the second conversation of like a
Yes.
standard discount.
that's the second thing.
That was,
Yeah.
like,
Right.
New
Really, both of those
construction.
examples were that example.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
combine
right.
new construction and standard discount into the second topic.
Correct.
Which staff will be working on. We will not have it ready in December.
Yeah.
Definitely
Okay.
pushing for
So what
January.
we're
But
gonna say, yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I was gonna say is if the more we talk this out, the more, I'm seeing we're just kind of swirling around the same point, which is it's a zero sum, it's a zero sum game, as Doug said. And perhaps the best scenario is that we only allow it for unique circumstances and they can fill out their application, management can make a decision, and then they could appeal that to the board, and then the board can make a case by case decision for anything that's unique and forget about, energy efficiency. Because eventually we'll have to shift those costs back around. Whereas unique are going to be what Doug said, which is he envisions this, and I'm paraphrasing now, of course. He envisions this as rarely used people come when there's something happens. So if we go to just the unique circumstances, we just go to CI, and that's it. We stop there, full stop, period. Unique demonstrable circumstances justify a change, reviewed by staff, decision made, appeal process to the board. Then we basically handle any of the unique ones and we don't get into this constant shifting zero sum game. That is an option. Because I'm kind of hearing kind of a building of that idea, but just.
I would say it's a safe option because then we are not going to be surprised so we have a hand on it. It might be because it's so complex and it's very difficult to anticipate all the unintended stuff. Maybe we should start like that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there are benefits to taking it this slowly because we can always change this in the future. And I think we did hear from a customer that came in with
Yes.
what I would personally consider a unique situation with the
I would
heating on
agree.
for 5 months of a year. That's killing that customer's EDU, and they gave written
Yeah.
notice and they could give justification.
And so
To
that
me,
could
that
be
that
solved
that
by
would be solved by
allowing them
a
to do a
unique
reset.
demonstration. So I do think that there are situations like that we want to accommodate. So I think I would be comfortable with just CI for now, or I should say one CI for now.
So basically, we would set up an appeal process.
Yes.
People sign a form, explain the situation, come to the board.
Provide proof.
Yeah. Yeah.
Start with staff
Yeah,
level
start with
first.
staff. Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to unreasonably withhold
Yes,
a unique,
exactly.
I mean, the one we're talking about, if I had the authority to have moved their AMU to after that period, I would have done so already. I don't have that authority currently.
Correct.
But if I did, I would have done it because, I mean, it's silly to do construction in the middle of winter, but Caldor happened and supply chain issues happened. It wasn't their fault.
Yeah.
And so you got to have some sympathy, empathy.
So I think the ability, based on special circumstances and appeal process, to cause a
Yeah.
reset that simulates repurchasing your home, if you will.
Yeah.
Voilà.
Correct.
I like that a lot, and at least we'll take the pressure off of the extreme cases.
And
Exactly.
if I could suggest, if
Yeah.
we do want to continue pursuing the second part, the energy efficiency part, maybe that gets incorporated into the next rate study.
Well, actually, can I say something?
I'm just suggesting,
Yeah.
yeah, say whatever you want, yeah.
You know, we have another mechanism for energy efficiency, which is a rebate. Instead of using rate change,
Yeah.
let's give rebate to have people doing this big investment and keep the efficiency out.
Right, but all I was,
It's much
Yeah.
simpler and
and it's simpler for staff to administer too. I was just offering it
Yeah.
if the board had a will to talk about this to consider for
So-
next rate study. You
and
don't have
it's
to.
also saying that we're trying to remove the initial capital cost as
Yeah,
well.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I guess the other, one other question, I agree with a lot of this. So the other question would be frequency. I would think, if I were in your situation as the person adjudicating this at first, if they were doing this every year, you could have that tracked as a part of the unique, I mean, if they were overdoing something here, do we need to have a separate provision on that, or could that be part of the decision-making process as criteria or something that you have?
I like having hard and fast rules because it takes subjectivity away. You did this for my neighbor, but not for me.
Okay.
And to go back to what Bertrand said at planning, which is spot on, elite credit, you can get one no more than once every 5 years. So I would just go for consistency.
Okay.
You can appeal
So,
a unique situation
a
once every 5
reset
years.
once
It's
every 5
basically,
years.
let's call this the elite credit of electric, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so then I would say, I don't know if we need like a motion or whatever.
That would be great.
Process
I just
here,
want
but
to
I
see
would say,
if there are other nods in this direction we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to have a set of rules just to point to, but it's too complex.
and yeah, I don't think we can foresee situations like the one that the customer that had their heating on, like, I don't know that we would have that.
Right.
It's too
Right.
complicated in some ways, so.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, each one of these shouldn't take me more or staff more than a couple hours to review the documentation, the
Right.
situation,
Do you think there should be a fee?
If you do apply for this,
a fee to cover staff time. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Just like we do for anything else.
But also reduce the number of
barriers to entry.
frivolous requests.
Right.
Yeah, and I would set it based on, I think, and I'll talk with Brandy a bit more. But if we set it, somewhere between 2 and 4 hours, we're talking between $100 to $200 on the fees, because we can't charge more than fees our actual costs incurred, really.
Yeah.
And we have to be able to justify, and there has to be a nexus. So I could bring back, and if we go down this path, I don't know that it needs to go to the community forum.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
it's the board's call, not mine.
That's fine.
If we do, I could bring back an ordinance for the board's consideration with all this kind of,
Can we review it planning first?
well, that's what I would, yeah.
okay, yeah, we can. It's gonna be, it's gonna be drafted
I
by
think
the,
it would
it's gonna be
save
drafted by
time.
the,
It's so
Yeah,
complex, yeah.
but I'm wondering if we're doing that, then also having an option to, on a sale where propane has been replaced by electric, the option for the new owner to,
that'll come in part 2 at Doug, as Doug said.
oh, okay. All right, so you want to wait on
We'll
that?
incorporate that, Doug. I think we both captured that in our notes, and Bertrand to do that on part 2 for the next one, which is the standard deduction. Standard AMU discount. We'll push all that into that.
I really like this conversation that people.
Yeah.
Generally,
Everybody's ready for the party.
No, I think this is.
no,
good.
it's the GM's report. And plus I
Oh.
want another vote. They're so much fun now.
I mean, I think this makes sense. I appreciate the board's feedback on it. I think this makes us in a good.
I appreciate the
situation.
time you've put in.
Yeah, thanks to
So-
Bertrand and the rest of the committee as
Yeah,
well.
thank you.
So from staff perspective, what would be helpful for us to conclude this, put a bow on it, is the board declines to take action on C2. We're not going to do that, so we don't have to discuss it at this time. We could do it in the next rate study. And then the board is directing staff to come back with parameters for a CI as well as a fee, set of rules, back to planning, then back to the board.
Yeah, with things like, I think once every 5 years.
Yep.
Things like you can choose which year it applies when you start over. I think
Yep.
those are kind of the nuances that I heard.
Yep.
That I want to make sure are captured, but I think that's what I would be, I would motion for.
Yeah.
If we need to do that. So,
Yeah, and it's to deal with special circumstances that
correct,
that the rates could not anticipate.
correct.
And I can draft something like that, get it through council and try and get it. I don't know that we'll get to December, but we could definitely have a January by the time I get it back from Josh. Because it's an ordinance, so I need him to do it. But yeah,
Okay,
Thanks, everyone.
that's excellent.
so again, I'm just a motion on those
Oh,
things.
I will motion that the things that we just discussed are what we recommend staff do.
Okay, is there a second?
A second.
Okay, excellent. All right, no further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
I
No?
abstain.
You abstain, okay. Got it.
I'm just
You can
a
abstain,
little overwhelmed.
yeah. Okay, let's move on then to the general manager's report.
First of all, let me start by saying the general manager really thought we would be 4:30 before that one finished. So I'm very pleased by how well that went. That was great.
Well, the general manager underestimates the efficiency and determination of this board.
Not a whole lot really to report on the general manager's report. The one thing a couple things just to highlight, just of interest to the board. The wastewater treatment plant design continues on schedule. We should have the 90% design for staff review in February with the final bid documents in March. Then we can go out to bid April. And depending if we go with a 30 or 60-day process, I need to concur with USDA because they have a different set of rules than the state. Which way they'll let us do it. We would open bids May or June and then issue a notice of award in June, July. So we're tracking with what I've been saying, but that's just the update on that. The electrical efficiency study, we should have that for staff review in January. And then hopefully our comments will be done and then back to the board just so they can peruse it probably February. The water one, we should be putting that out for RFP soon. Hoping to get that back in middle spring with wastewater following, because the wastewater master plan, they need to have boots on the ground. They actually have to pop manhole lids, survey, and obviously in the winter, we're not doing that. So that will be whenever the snow melts, we can get the wastewater master plan request for proposal out. And then propane will follow next fiscal year as the board directed, and then connection fees will follow that. Just for the board's edification of something of interest, on the next planning, Amador County Planning Commission meeting. I don't know if Firewise saw this or not, but they are going to codify what they've been telling us they were going to do about if it's a hazardous tree or a defensible space tree, no permits required from TriTac. That is going before the Amador County Planning Commission and then ultimately the board for approval.
When is that?
They meet the second Tuesday of every month.
Oh,
I used to be on the planning
When's the
commission.
next one?
So I don't want to tell you the wrong date, but it's on their website
Okay.
and you can go to their website, look at their calendar, and they have the link for the agenda. But they're finally doing it. I don't anticipate anyone's going to care because there's full support from staff and from everybody up here. Alpine County has not done anything of which I'm aware to date relative to that, and El Dorado won't because they never adopted the specific plan, so they don't care. But anyway, that's relevant. Next summer, I don't know if anyone has been driving up and down, but you've seen the drill rig on top of Silver Dam. Has anyone seen that driving up and down? So they are doing borings. They're going to be replacing that dam next year. Their hand is being forced. EID's hand is being forced by the federal government and as well as Division of Safety of Dams. So they have to replace that dam. That means they're going to be putting in a cofferdam. They're going to be doing a lot of work out there. It is very likely that 88 will be closed, not just traffic control, but actually closed for periods of time next year. please plan accordingly. I will keep the board updated as I know anything more.
Even though the freeway is
Even
different,
though.
the highway is different than the dam.
Even they're doing work on a dam that's right upstream of the highway. I'm pretty
Right.
sure Caltrans doesn't want something cut and loose when they're doing that work. Just knowing Caltrans, and they're going, my guess is there will be hard closures just like they did over on Echo Summit when they replaced the bridge, those sorts of things.
Oh, I
So
see.
they're gonna drain it, or will they drain cable?
They're gonna no, silver, not completely, but yes, they will drain it down
Right,
more
well,
than,
They drained cables a few years ago, so they're gonna drain silver.
yeah, more than they usually do. Yeah, but they're putting in a coffer dam, which will let them retain some water in it.
His cables was empty.
Yeah, you could.
It almost became Twin Lakes again, for those who remember that.
So anyway,
Down to
that
16.
project is coming. Just wanted the board to be aware of it.
Some artifacts.
Caltrans is
When
still
do you think they're going to do that?
next summer.
Next summer.
Yes, the design is happening right now with construction. I talked to their general manager, who used to be my general manager a million years ago, Jim Abercrombie, and they are targeting to actually do construction and be done next summer. They also are wanting power from us, but they haven't moved on anything on that. So we'll wait and see, but there's a whole process to go through. They have to have electric gauging with a constant power source, and solar is not sufficient for them in the winter, or batteries. The batteries would be too big they have to gauge with a gauging station for their fish releases, and it has to be constant. The
Did they
power
want a
bill-
permanent electric connection at the dam?
Yes.
Oh, well, while you're at it, you could get Kit
So I was
Carson.
going to ask that. What about the fiber optic? All that stuff is going to be compromised for a while?
Yes.
Wow.
No, but yeah, our stuff were there I mean, if things cut loose, we'd all be in trouble, you know.
Yeah, exactly, damage.
But we're on the bridge. We're not down where they're doing the work. So fingers crossed, you know, when the creek don't rise, we're going to be fine. But that is happening. There's a lot of stuff going on. Caltrans is still about 40% of their staffing levels. So
They're
sure
at,
you've
they're
noticed
at 60% staffing or at
40%
40%
of their
staff?
normal staffing levels. They're not staging out of Peddler. They're staging out of West Point for Peddler, which is a long way to go.
Yeah,
Caples is the only one that's really running in our neck of the woods. So, I mean, I'm sure everyone that's noticed driving up, there's been a reduced plow quality or frequency.
Yep.
And they just don't have staff. Speaking of that, tomorrow, we will be in triage mode. We will be doing emergency access only, roads only, providing emergency vehicle access. We're anticipating 4 to 5 feet in the span of less than 24 hours. And so that's what our snow removal is going to focus on. I'm pleased to report the referral bonus that the board has, or the personnel decided to go with, has definitely helped. We've started getting some referrals from people. Our snow removal staff is coming up to snuff. We're almost fully staffed. I think I need one more body at this point, which is great. So as long as we can keep the equipment running, we'll be good. Otherwise, we'll start looking at like night crews again if we have the ability. So we're continuing to recruit for snow removal. So if anyone knows anyone, please send them our way. And I think that's all I have.
So just for clarification about what you said about the dam at Silver Lake,
Yeah,
it won't affect our cable? It's
it
attached to there?
shouldn't affect our cable. If the whole thing cut loose, if it was a
Yeah.
catastrophic failure, yes, it would affect our cable.
So they're gonna go down below the water level?
Uh-huh.
That's where all the work is gonna be done?
Yes, they have to go all the way down to the keyway and redo the
Yeah.
entire keyway. And I hear, from what I heard, they're talking about 20 foot beyond the existing keyway in terms of depth, because it was built on some questionable stuff back in the day, supposedly.
but all that is east of the freeway, right? None of
All
it
of that-
comes underneath it.
Right, but if the coffer dam broke.
No, if there was an accident, we could
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
part of it.
Yeah, but generally we should not be affected.
Our electrics delivered.
Our stuff's on the other side
Yeah.
of where they're
I'm trying to
doing work.
visualize.
Yeah,
Just
no,
if you're driving to Kirkwood, if you're going eastbound on 88, most of the work's gonna be on the right-hand side. All our stuff's on the left-hand side of the highway.
Yeah, but but at the dam itself, it doesn't cross the highway there?
No,
it's all
No.
on the other side.
it's all on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
the
there's,
spillways are
and
fully on
there's
the
that
right-hand
road that
side.
goes over the top of the dam. That's separate.
Okay.
So the one comment I would like to make on snow removal, which is, I think last storm was, at least in my neck of the wood, was done the best in years, actually. So it was.
Well,
Well, but-
feel free to pass that along to the employees tonight. I'm sure they'd love to hear
Yeah,
it.
yeah, that would be good, because, I mean, the startup time is hard for this.
Well, the good thing is, on the west side, we were running a second season operator. That was helpful. Taylor.
Yeah, no, they were really on top of it during the last storm, which was not a small storm, it was a real storm.
No,
And
it
the,
was-
and the second one was very heavy snow, which is always more difficult. And they really kept on the top of it. Like I said, I don't remember, for me, it's 3, 4, 5 years until it was done with that kind of quality.
And we do, and for the first time in 5 years, we have 3 fully functional loaders. So that's good. That's helping.
Okay,
Rick, I think you're up.
So
Yep.
tomorrow will be another test.
yeah, yeah. Rick,
If the forecast is right.
Hey, good afternoon. I really don't have anything else to add that hasn't already been talked about. Again, thanks to staff on repairing the water leak. Our snow removal team has been great, and we actually, the new operator that started today is already out on his own. It's somebody that Eric had found, and I was talking with Joe just a few minutes ago, and he's just amazed how quickly he picked up on the machine, and so that was a thumbs up on finding him, which will really help this weekend. The only thing I want to add is, since we have full board here today, just remind your friends and neighbors that if there are vehicles out there that are covered, buried under snow, homeowners should really make an attempt to either stake their vehicles or move them or brush them off so our operators don't accidentally hit vehicles. And this is really important in parking pads, not so much in driveways, but parking pads. If we lose your vehicle and we damage it, it just costs everybody money. So other than that, I don't have any other thing to add unless the board has questions for operations.
want to send out one of the emergency urgent notifications, just let them know, severe storm, make sure your cars are proper.
Yeah, I think,
We
yeah,
could do,
you remind me how to do that. I will do that.
I will remind you, it's probably a good idea. Rick.
It's, yeah, I mean, we have it in the snow removal notices, but not everybody gets those.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Yep.
Okay, we can do that.
Good, great.
Okay,
Yeah, on that front, a few weeks, not of 10 days ago, or whatever, there was a message that was basically stale that went through the system.
yeah, I talked about that, and yeah,
So, I mean, it's okay to have.
it was
testing, but
unfortunate, but I don't think it'll happen again.
The only problem is, it's like saying fire when there is no fire, then after people don't pay attention anymore to the message. So,
Yeah. Okay, all right, let's get an update on the standing committee, start with finance.
Not a lot to report unless Eric reminds me of something. Probably the biggest accomplishment is just Dominic's gotten a lot of progress getting through the transition from Kelly. So I think the reports were much more cleaned up
Yeah, Tommy, are you there?
this month than.
I see everyone has their camera
There he
off.
is. Yeah. So anyway, so
Wait,
thanks for putting in some effort and
Of course.
making some gains there.
He came in at 4 a.m. one day just to work on stuff. So
All right, well, anyway, we appreciate the effort, and we're glad that we're caught up. Thank you.
Again, really close.
Okay. Good. Anything else? Anything else from planning?
I'll highlight just from what I submitted for the notes of the needs assessment. Eric is still looking for someone to help us with that.
Right. Okay, operations.
I don't have anything to add.
Okay, and then
It's a pretty
communication.
brief meeting. Communications didn't meet.
Okay, all right. I have a fair number of things to cover from personnel. So do you have the charts to put up?
I do not.
Oh.
It's in my email and this is not my computer.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, Bob.
I'll just pass this around. So, oh, this isn't the whole thing.
You want me to go email it to myself real quick or?
So anyway, I worked on having a graphical representation of both the annual things that we're working on to see where those are, as well as the 5-year plan. So I run it by Doug to get his feedback. I was going to show it to people, but we'll do that later. And my plan would be just to make that a standard part of every meeting, just to look at that. I found it really helpful just having a sense of where everything fits in line. And like, the major things in terms of each of the master plans, knowing when we expect to see them. I found it really helpful to see all that in one place and graphically.
That's great.
So,
Thank you.
yeah. But I didn't quite get it into the packet, but I came very close. We also at Personnel did a lot of time thinking about staffing and recruiting and what we could do differently. A couple of things we came up with, which you've seen in the newsletter. One was a finder's fee for people who can help find employees. So $500 finder's fee for full-time, $250 for part-time. Although we didn't put the $250 in the other. I thought Brandy did a brilliant job of putting together a flyer of said why work at Kirkwood. And I think one of the things I appreciate now a lot more is the fact that, if you're young and want to be in the mountains and you need the work, there's a lot of attraction to doing this. By the time you're ready to start a family and buy a house, it's a little bit different. And in that regards, I don't know if it's, I don't know how much further to go into that, but I'll just leave it at that. So we tried to do that, and it's already had some impact. Two other things we decided to do is I feel like, and we'll talk about this when all the employees get together, there's two words that summarize this year, success and stress. When I went through the list of everything that got done, I was kind of overwhelmed and I'd forgotten it. And I think we don't spend enough time here just sort of recognizing the various accomplishments that have happened. So I think we can do more there. And the stress, I think there's a little bit of expectation that maybe this year COVID wouldn't be the issue, everything else going on, but it was still an incredibly stressful year. And so one of the things we decided to do then was to do the annual holiday bonus based on success and do another one of the same price to just sort of recognize the stress of what people have done. I think it'll be appreciated. And I think we want to send a really strong message that, every utility was up. There are a couple of switchovers on electric because of PG&E. Putting those a couple of minutes aside, everything was available all year long. The wastewater treatment plant decided to not go rogue on us this year. Some of that was staff watching out for it. Some of it was a little bit of luck that it didn't age out faster. So we thought it would be a good idea to recognize that for staff, because this was just a really tough year. So that was what happened in personnel. Temporary advisory committee reports. The only one is really the special tax, the assessment needs for fire.
I did not update on that. You're right. Could I update on that?
Yeah, so why don't you do that now?
Sure. So working with the consultant, I'm working with they need something that we don't have, nor do we have the ability to create. And the counties here, Amador has it, Alpine has no ability to create it. So I'm working directly with their GIS person to create the boundaries and make sure every parcel that should be included is included. So we've had one Zoom already. We're gonna have multiple Zooms because I can go into a certain program and show them boundaries, and then they can take what they have and create it. So they have everything in terms of a database. They just don't have a graphical representation, and they need that. That's one of the criteria. So been working on that. So they're a little bit behind on schedule getting that done, but we're still pushing. Teola from Alpine County, clerk of the board / elections director / she wears a lot of hats, but she's been gone a lot. And so they have not been able to connect with her in terms of confirming dates. We will be meeting. I talked with John because he had the experience with me on the short-term financing. We need to retain a bond counsel to set up the resolutions and everything else it ultimately becomes a CFD, the special tax does, even though because it's assessed. Anyway, we agreed that we'll continue with Jones Hall, who we used for our prior two CFDs, as well as our short-term financing. We could use our normal district council, but our past history and that they specialize in this and we have a good relationship. And I was quite pleased with them. I think John was as well, Standish too. We're going to continue with Jones Hall. And so we have a meeting Monday. I can't remember what time they finally said it. It was bouncing around. So we'll be meeting with them. So that is continuing to move forward. So I apologize for not covering that in my GM report. Thank you, Bob,
Okay,
reminding me.
all right. So for general discussion, any board members want to bring?
We
Think so?
usually talk about LAFCO. Isn't that, is
Yeah.
that in the standing committees, temporary committees, or is that in general discussion?
Standing.
I think it's standing, so you're right. I skipped that over. Do you want to add something?
Just that we mentioned a long time ago about the plan that we have to, we got the tech,
Right.
whatever text, and we have, nothing's actually, but we have another meeting in 2 weeks, I believe,
Yeah, it's the
The
20th.
20th, I
There'll be a LAPCO meeting and
where this will
Terry,
be.
Terry will instruct each of the people to update their portion.
Right.
So
So hopefully we get.
the goal
conclusion
is
to
to
that.
show, are we properly servicing the territory? And so there's a report from 2006 or 2008, something like that. So we converted that into a Word document, so we'll just update it. The changes are not enormous in terms of the service area.
Yeah, from our perspective,
From our
our
perspective.
level of effort is something we can easily handle.
Yeah.
to
So,
get our
yeah,
portion.
that's a good point, Doug. So thank you for that. Okay, going back to general discussion then, is there anything anyone wants to bring up?
I had a couple of small things. Hopefully.
Okay, go for it.
One was, I guess, 2 questions for Eric. The electric infrastructure study. Did you talk about that already?
I did.
Okay, I'll have to.
So that,
Let me just repeat it because
There was a lot of stuff. Sorry.
no, there was a lot of stuff. Staff should have a draft this month and then get our comments back to the consultant, and it should be done in January sometime, and then bring it back to the board in February.
Thank you. Apologize for that.
No worries. I talked about a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned Caltrans about the dam, and sort of like, and it reminded me that there was a lot of conversation with Caltrans about signage, electric signage that was happening. Do you know anything of where that is or anything on that?
They had their second meeting with the reduced project. They did, and they hadn't redone their environmental, and beyond that, I don't know.
Okay.
I've seen nothing since that time.
Okay.
And that second meeting, Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, that was about 6 months ago.
Yes.
And then my last thought or question was that we had a lot of conversation, not a lot of conversation. We talked about the accounts due earlier in the meeting, and I feel like we've talked about at times making sure people get set up for automatic payments and doing things like that, maybe through communications committee or things like that. And I'm just wondering if there's a renewed interest in somehow convincing or pushing people to try to get onto automatic payments to reduce the number of late payments that we have to deal with.
We did it, and I'll answer that briefly. We did a brief campaign 3 years ago, Bob.
Yeah.
You were on IT when it was still called IT back then.
right.
I think it was 3 years ago. We did a pretty aggressive campaign to try and get people to switch over with some success. We had about 60 switch over, which is about 10%. So we had that was a pretty good successful. And what we've implemented since then, new customers have to sign up and for electronic.
Yeah, so when Drew
paperless.
sets them up, they start out that way.
Yeah. I mean, we also did the HOA snow removal.
Yes, and we got great participation in that.
And what ended up being with that? I don't remember.
Tommy, I think all but 3 participated. You're muted still.
That does sound correct. 3.
I think it was all but 3. It was 18 or 19 participated.
It's very impressive.
And did that impact their snow removal or all of their payments?
They only signed up for snow removal, but we continue to urge them to do it for everything. So
Okay.
I think actually we did have 2 that switched everything over, if I'm not mistaken. Sun Meadows 3, 4, and one other one, I think Drew would know, but I think we did have 2 that might have actually done a whole switch.
Well, anyway, one way
Yeah.
to do this is to have, a real.
Yeah, to think about, is there a way, something we can do to encourage?
Yeah.
Now that Tommy's almost caught up, he needs a new project.
Let me get him full staffed, then he can be caught up.
You're welcome,
That's true.
Tom.
too. Okay,
All right, that's it. Thank you.
okay. Anything else? No? Okay, then 3:30, meeting's adjourned. So I hope we'll see everybody
At 5.
at 5. Okay, and I will, the charts that I didn't put online, I'll just email those to everybody and you can take a look and then give me some